share it again just to?
Not a problem. Just give me one moment. I'm just making sure the YouTube is live. Okay, we're live, and yes, I'm going to share my screen.
Great.
Thank you.
So, and she can walk you through the link of how to get there. I don't want to have the screen up for the meeting because this is not the item for discussion tonight. It was a July 2022 resolution that was passed by the full board pretty decisively in July. But if any of you individually need to see the link, the committee, the full board voted 29-5 to 0-0. It was a special meeting that we hosted in July, just so that people know. So I guess with that in mind, I just wanted to, call the meeting to order and thank everyone who's able to join tonight. We wanted just to provide, for on the record purposes, an opportunity to talk a little bit more about how things are moving forward with the remote and in-person options. I think everyone who's on this call has hopefully also seen Max's email from about 2 weeks ago, which was a declaration from Mayor Adams about the extension of the virtual option for the month of October, or at least through October 22nd. So I'll pause there, and if anyone didn't see that or has questions about it, let me know. Okay, so if that's the case, I'll move on from there. That really is leaving us with the question, and again, the reason we wanted to meet tonight was to talk a little bit about what happens after October 22nd and being prepared for a potential eventuality of having the hybrid options start effective November 1st. So that's why we wanted to have a quick chat tonight. Max is unable to join tonight, but his previous conversations with me have indicated a few points that I wanted to relay to the task force. One was that as it pertains to full board meetings, that starting in November, assuming that the mayor does not extend the emergency declaration into November, that the full board meetings will begin in a hybrid capacity. Our understanding is that Kay Carpin we will use his church for that meeting, for the November meeting, and most likely for the December meeting. So through the end of the year, we will use one location for full board meetings where we will have a hybrid attendance model, following the guidelines of what we set forth both in a resolution and what the borough president's office tells us. But those meetings will be held. The first meeting would be November 1st. So just a reminder to people, we meet for full board on the first Tuesday of the month. That hits in November on November 1st, so the day after Halloween. And the expectation is, until we hear from the city or the state that the meeting will be held, need to have a quorum, and that quorum will need to be at K-Carp, at the church, and at that location. And then there will be decisions by the new chair, Beverly, who also could not join tonight, to discuss how exemptions are made and how that's going to work. The same for December. My understanding is for committees, and this is the one thing that I would like to leave open for discussion tonight, because many of you on this call are either past or current committee chairs, is really looking at how attendance is determined for attendance in the board office for a quorum beginning November 1st. So any meeting we do in November would have to be have a quorum, and the committee meetings in the board office, so preservation, parks and environment, transportation would need to have at least half their members in the board office in order for business proceedings to take place. My understanding from Max, and again, Ashley, I'm very grateful to her for being on this call, at least to get us all set up, is that the board office does have new ventilation, that there are some very positive aspects of being able to meet, and there are some processes that they're working to put in place with the new chair on how those meetings can take place. So I'll stop there. That's really the update from my end. And then, I think the task force will continue to meet. I think we'd like to meet before the end of the year. But those were sort of the immediate issues at hand. So I'll open it up there in case anyone has any questions or wants to comment, and we can take it from there.
So the Beverly would be the one who will monitor how close we are to a quorum or whether in danger of not achieving one, and would she also be making the call on who has a legitimate excuse to go hybrid and who doesn't?
So I think that is something that is still up for discussion. For November, for the full board meeting, I think that will fall under her responsibility, just because in the interest of time, we will not have a chance to really adjudicate this or have a big conversation about it during the month of October amongst the task force and vote on it. I do think we need to go back and look, if those of you have looked through the resolution from July, we did state clearly that when it comes to decisions about which members may participate virtually at full board meetings and at committee meetings will be forthcoming until further task force discussions and a full board resolution. So we're not going to have a full board resolution ready to be voted on by the time of the November meeting.
I just put a point of clarification. Beverly, because she's taking over from an interim chair, Beverly is already the board chair. It's not like she takes over on November 1st.
Right, no, I'm saying that my point, Susan, if you've looked at our resolution that was voted on and approved pretty resoundingly, that the understanding is that for full board meetings and committee meetings will be forthcoming upon future task force discussions and a full board resolution. There is not an opportunity. If we were to do a resolution tonight, we would not be able to vote on it.
Oh, sure. That's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify because it sounded as if you were suggesting that Beverly doesn't take over until November 1st. But I just want to make it clear she's already.
No. We know she's in charge right now, and
Okay.
I think she would be here if she weren't. She's on I think another important borough-wide call right now that she needs to be on. Otherwise, she would be here.
Well,
but
that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So again, I think the issue is really, I think for the purposes of this call, one, the plan is right now, if the mayor doesn't extend this and the governor doesn't extend it, and God forbid, hopefully there is not a COVID outbreak in the next 3 weeks, there will be a hybrid structure for our board meetings starting, at our first full board meeting, which I think might be for us on the first, we might be the first Manhattan board to meet at a full board level because it's November 1st, first Tuesday of the month. So that will be a hybrid meeting. And that's why we wanted to convene everyone tonight, is to just make sure everyone knew that. I know we were going to follow the instructions of the borough president's office and what was in our resolution. So I see other hands up, and I don't want to dominate the discussion. I think I saw Ken, you've spoken. Do you have anything else to add, or are you?
Well, just as a follow-up, I feel a sense of urgency that we sort of take these matters out of the hands of the board chair or whoever, and that we follow up on our previous resolution and actually, make the tough decisions about who's going to make the. We talked about maybe having an elected position for full board meetings where somebody just has that job to make those determinations and to monitor the quorum situation. So I guess I'm not real thrilled about waiting until next year to resolve all these things. It seems like we could do it sooner.
Okay, that's a very good point. I'm going to go to Jay and then Seema.
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, I can understand if I'm accused of form over substance, but you keep saying that unless the emergency declaration is extended, starting November 1st, we're going to go to hybrid meetings. That's not really true. Starting November 1st, if it's not extended, we are going to go back to in-person meetings, not hybrid meetings. The default, according to statute, having nothing to do with our resolution, is in-person meetings. The only way it becomes a hybrid meeting is if some member of the board qualifies under one of the unexpected situations, examples of which are in the statute. But
sure, Jay, if I can just stop. Yeah.
But no, let me finish. So we are going back to in-person meetings, and I think it's very important that everyone on the board understand that that is their obligation. And unless they qualify under an exceptional circumstance, they're expected to be there in person. As far as determining whether somebody is qualified, I totally disagree with Ken. I think it's the chair's responsibility and prerogative, especially since most of these exceptional and unexpected circumstances are likely to arise at the last minute, and some procedure where you have to convene a committee or a panel and vote on it is totally impractical. I think we have to put faith in the responsibility and consideration of our elected chair to evaluate what are likely to be requests very close to the time of these meetings. As far as committees, it will be up to the co-chairs of the committees. And again, I think we have to be comfortable vesting those people who are in leadership positions with our confidence that they will act responsibly. If in a given situation there is some question, it may be ultimately perfectly reasonable for the chair or committee chair who makes the decision to then go back, discuss the circumstances for the following time that situation.
I understand, Jay. I just want to be really clear here, and I think I understand what you're saying. If you read the resolution that we supported and voted on in July, it says very clearly that Community Board 7 will institute open meeting amended procedures provided by New York State Open Meeting Law, Chapter 5(6) of the laws of 2022, as set forth in this resolution to permit modified hybrid meetings.
Yeah, but
the reason why we're mentioning hybrid meetings is because that's what they are. That is what they will be. That is maybe the same thing we were doing back before the pandemic, but it's how it was worded in the resolution, and that's why we reference it tonight.
Whatever, regardless of what the wording of the resolution, any rules or procedures that our board may adopt have to be consistent with the law, with the statute. And the statute is very specific that excused absences can only be for exceptional circumstances.
Right, and we identify those we identified those in the resolution that we adopted, and we made minor changes to what the borough president's office had provided to us.
I'm not sure that the recitation of a couple of the things in our resolution are legal under the statute. We added a couple of categories that were not under the statute that I don't think are necessarily exceptional, but in substance, that will, in my opinion, ultimately depend on how the board chair and committee chairs actually carry out their decisions with regard to any requests. But again, while we have a mandate under the statute to decide whether we want to have any hybrid at all, which we already have passed this resolution, which declares our intent to allow hybrid meetings as long as they're in compliance with the state law. So that, our discretion in how we comply with the state law is limited to those boundaries set forth in that law. And
right, and the state law.
I'm just concerned that we give people, our board members, the impression that somehow this board can further consider, broad categories of excuses and discretion when we don't have that authority.
Thanks, Jay. I'm going to go to I think Seema is next, or Seema, you're next.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to understand more process about how we're going to, I think it's section 3B talks about, how we're going to be sort of further elaborating on how some of these decisions get made. Is that something that's going to happen here, or is it at steering? Because I feel like, well, I agree it has to obviously be compliant with the open meetings law, goes without saying, or maybe it shouldn't go without saying. It feels like it's still too loose to me. Like, do we have a limitation on number? What happens if someone somehow has many extraordinary circumstances? How is that dealt with? The haziness of it makes me a little bit concerned that, some people might fall back on this more than we would like.
Right. And you're, as somebody who's on, I think you may be the only person on the executive committee who's on this call tonight. So yes. That is something that you should definitely take back to the fellow leaders of the board. Look, we voted on this in July so that the borough president knew that we largely supported what the borough president, had planned, with a few modifications. We do not know to me, we want to meet tonight to discuss sort of what our short-term plan is for November. And the short-term plan for November is that if there is no extension by the mayor and there is no extension by the governor, there will be some sort of in-person meeting of the full board on November 1st. Right. And that will involve, part of what I wanted to say tonight is that, according to Max and Ashley in the board office, is that the resources are there to prepare for that, to have it ready. How those 26 members, assuming we have 50 people on the board right now, I'm not sure what our total number is, how we have a quorum for that meeting. The understanding that all of us have is that that there needs to be a quorum in person for business to be conducted. So how those 26 people, assuming there are 50 people on the board right now, how those 26 people are selected, given that we just elected a new board chair, to me is up for discussion. I think we've made some recommendations to the new board chair about how we think that should work. And we've also made some recommendations, I think, largely aligned with Jay, about how the committees should conduct things throughout the month of November, assuming that this gets moved on. The there at the committee level, I do think there is a slight difference between what we put in our resolution and what certain people are saying. So for instance, when we talk in when we say decisions about on committee virtual participation should be standard across all committees and task forces, for instance, I think that's a departure from what some people are saying now, including several members of the task force who couldn't be here tonight, who think that it should be left up to each individual committee to determine how virtual participation works. What we voted on at the meeting was to have it standard across all committees. So that's something that I think for us as a task force, maybe it's a little loosey-goosey for the November committee meetings, but we could meet again later this month, or we could meet in early November. We could talk about it now and propose something to go to full board in November, where we said for committees, this is how we think virtual participation or hybrid or whatever we're calling it, but it's clearly going to be different from, if you have a quorum, how the quorum is going to work for committee participation, not in November, but probably starting in December, because we wouldn't be able to vote on it until the November full board meeting on November 1st. Does that make sense?
Yes.
No, it doesn't make sense, Elizabeth. You keep using the phrase, we'll determine how the quorum is going to be determined, and how the quorum is going to be committee meetings as well as full board meetings. The default, according to the law, is everybody is required to be there in person. It says so in the statute. We can't determine how the quorum is. Everybody is supposed to be there. So if we have 50 members, we start with the assumption that 50 people have to be there. And if anyone has requests an excuse and wants to participate remotely by teleconferencing, they have to make a request, and it has to be within the bounds of the statute and approved by the authority. I won't say the chair, because you keep saying that we haven't decided who's going to do it, but whoever makes that decision is going to decide. But other than that, the assumption is we're going to have 50 members present at the board meeting. If we have a committee that has 10 members, the default and the assumption is that all 10 members are obligated to be at that meeting. And if they don't want to be at the meeting, they have to fall under the exceptional circumstances that are set forth in the statute. It's really very clear. It's really not.
Jay, this is not any different than what happened in the 90s and the 2000s. Okay. We've always needed a quorum for our meetings. Okay. So,
and this hasn't changed that.
Right. So there's really nothing to debate here. The question is, I don't think we're debating tonight that people who are not showing up should be allowed to count for a quorum.
Well, then why I'm just curious. You keep saying
we're talking about attendance.
Twice you've used the phrase how the quorum will be determined. What does that mean?
Jay, we're trying to do this in the fairest way possible for people, and trying to recognize that we're in uncharted territory, that we are doing the best we can. We are trying to set some guidelines and some recommendations that hopefully the borough president has listened to. If he hasn't, he should. Hopefully,
he's not the authority. We have state law. It's not up to the borough president to decide.
Jay, I'd appreciate if you not interrupt me for the rest of the meeting. I appreciate your comments, and I know you're approaching it from a legal perspective, and understand that what we're trying to do tonight is gather some thoughtful feedback so that we can relay it. The information and the purpose of the meeting tonight, and we're going to close in another 15 minutes, is really just to relay to people, one, we have a full board meeting on November 1st. Two, the city laws that have extended all of our opportunities to be all virtual goes until October 22nd. Beyond that, we don't know what's happening. So we have a couple of options. Those are the two things. We can do another meeting and try to carve out a resolution on how we're going to move forward on November 1st. Or we can say, we know, as we've discussed tonight, November 1st, assuming nothing changes to the city or the state law or extensions, we will be meeting and have a meeting. Jay, to your point, we expect and hope that all 50 members can be there in person at Kay's location. He has graciously offered to give us his space for the full board meeting. Those who cannot attend, we need to have a quorum. We need to make sure we have 26 people of the 50 board members, assuming we have 50 board members right now, 26 people in person at that meeting. If we do not, then we need to figure out what we're going to do. But my understanding is that we need to make sure we have 26 people on November 1st at that meeting. Beyond that, when it comes to the committees, it falls under the same category. We need to have a quorum in person at the board office. I was instructed by Max, and maybe if Ashley wants to weigh in on what's going on in the board office, but the board office, I've been there a few times in the last couple of months, but I think it's in pretty good shape. It's ready to host meetings for, even for the full committee, if they want to come as a full committee, or if half of them or half plus one show up, that's great too. Ashley, any comments there?
No, yeah, I agree. The only thing that we're just making sure is that the internet is strong and up to date. Only in case if some people want to bring their own devices, that all comes together. So that's the main thing that we're getting ready for November.
Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about the ventilation upgrades that have been made? Because I talked to Max about there's a very popular do-it-yourself filter air cleaner called the Corsi Rosenthal box that schools are using all over the country, and you can build it for like $100, but there are also commercial ones available that for more money. But anyway, I'd be interested in hearing.
Because I do go to the office based on my how I feel is good. However, I can definitely come back to you, to all the board members, and get specific details regarding with the ventilations, because I understand that's very much of a fear. And also we could probably still talk about protocols where still having a mask and making sure people still feel comfortable. But I can definitely come back to you with the actual details of the ventilation.
Thanks, Ashley. And Jay, for definitely have heard from Max today that there is brand new ventilation. For those of you who have not been back at the board office since 2019 or 2020, my understanding is that it is significantly improved. I'm not saying that it's grade A. Again, I don't know the details, but Max seemed to be very assurant that it would be safe for board members to return for committee meetings starting for the November ones, if that happens. And again, this could all be for naught, and we could go another 2 months. There could be another COVID spike, and the governor and the mayor may say, we want to return to allowing this extension to continue. We want to prepare tonight for the eventuality in the short term for November, first and foremost. So I see Polly. I'm sorry, I didn't notice your hand up for so long, but please want to hear from you. Oh, unmute. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. So I get what you're saying. We need to be prepared ahead of time because we've been having these discussions since I believe March, April, May, June, July. And so, yes, we do need to say, all right, this is the plan, and make it clear so that everyone is aware. So with on the committee level, that's no problem, like you said, because it'll be if you have 10 members of a committee, it's the quorum will be 6. My question to you, Ashley, is, will there be a quota on the amount of public attendees for the committee meetings at the office? Because I know we usually have people from the public at committee meetings that want to participate. So will there be a quota? Like, how are we handling that? What is the policy? Do they have to wear masks? Can you speak to that?
Well, again, that's something that we can definitely talk about. Again, you know, even though within transportation and other places, masks are being somewhat lax. However, if just to make everybody feel good, we can absolutely make it mandatory for people to have masks at least. But again, it's something that we haven't talked about, but we're definitely open to those ideas.
Well, I think that's something that we should, you know, address.
Absolutely.
Could we take a minute or two tonight to think through, like, I know that Max, for instance, had said, and Ashley, thanks for that. Max had said to me a few days ago that, you know, there's a possibility that we could limit the number of public people in the committee you know, in the CB7 office, hold people in the back and make them wait either outside, call their names when they're coming in, have an app or have something where they could, you know, they would know when their time would be to come in if they were coming to testify. You know, those are some ideas that maybe we could spend a minute or two if anyone on this call has ideas about. I think obviously if there's a committee of 10 people and 6 of them need to be present, we obviously need those 6 people around the table in the board office. We obviously are going to have somebody from the board staff, most likely, in the room as well. And then, you know, usually it's seating for, I think the capacity is 30 or 40 people. So let's say it's a big meeting, and, you know, usually if there are 15 people there, hopefully it wouldn't be a problem. But if there's, I don't know if we want to talk tonight about, like, if we think, for those of us who know what that office looks like, what we think is the maximum capacity before it gets too unsafe for people, or what we think could be unsafe. Requiring them to be masked. I mean, I watch television programs sometimes and I see the studio audience is all wearing masks. I think it's not unreasonable to ask people who come in to wear a mask. But again, this is why we have the task force. So do you have thoughts on that, Polly, since you're, you know?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about that, because I'm thinking, like, you know, the public comes in, if it's like really crowded and it's tight, someone in the public may not feel safe, you know, sitting in a space where there aren't people wearing masks or people coughing, etc. So it's, you know, even though I know, like, when the subway, you don't have to wear a mask now, but people still do because you're in tight quarters. So that's why I'm bringing that up. And I think that, you know, we need to address that before we actually start meeting in person on the committee level. Because as one of the co-chairs of public safety, I know that's a hot issue. So I know there will be a lot of people coming in, you know, for our meetings, you know, to kind of express their frustrations, etc. So I just want to know basically how are we going to address that.
May I comment, Elizabeth?
And do you plan, Polly, to meet in, if I could just finish with Polly,
Sure.
do you plan to meet in November? Because I know for this task force, we've met on sort of an ad hoc level, like once every month or a couple of months. Do you plan to have a meeting in November?
Right now, we're going to meet in November, and we are going to meet in person, you know. So that's why I just want to know basically what the parameters are.
Got it. Okay.
I think I froze. I'm not sure.
Maybe if we could walk out tonight with the remaining 15 or 20 minutes that we have, just with like our top 3 priorities for like that we can present to both the new chair and also sort of document sort of our top 3 priorities for how we want those, what we think are the top priorities for committee meetings. If there is, and I don't want to call it a hybrid because Jay, you'll get mad if I say that, but like if we want to have a meeting that is going to be a quorum, but expecting that potentially not all of the full members will be there, but having a quorum there, but also having the board office being used again, that might be useful. So if those are things that anyone with their hands raised want to speak to right now, I know Ken, you wanted to, so I'll go to you first.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we shouldn't necessarily.
Sorry about the helicopter noise that's like above.
I'm doing the best I can. I've just been appointed to the board of Stop the Chop, so I'm
Good.
working even harder
you.
on it than I was before. But we shouldn't necessarily be guided by to things like the relaxation of masks on mass transit, because those, let's be honest, those are as much political and business decisions as they are public health decisions. We should really, I think, be guided by public health to the extent that we can, and masks are still very much advisable. So I would very much be in favor of that. The question of whether there's a quota of people, there are things called CO2 meters, and I actually happen to have one that can tell you what the concentration of CO2 is in a room. And that's a very good proxy for what the potential is for the spread of a virus, because it tells you how many people are sort of exchanging air. And when it gets to a certain level, certain threshold, it starts to get dangerous, and there is more potential for exchange of a virus, besides just ideas, which is what we really want to exchange. So that might be one thing to do, is to actually have the office buy a CO2 meter. They cost like a couple of $100, and keep an eye on it. And when things get above a certain threshold, like 1,000 or 1,200, we say, like the fire department says, well, too many people here, just a thought.
Okay, so right now we have for ideas for committee meetings, masks being required for both the public who shows up and for board members when they come into the board office, and assumedly for staff as well. Number 2 is sort of a limit of the number of people in the audience, all wearing masks, obviously, but figuring out how we determine what the capacity in the room is going to be. And then, I think your idea of a CO2 meter is listed as well. So those are the three ideas on the table, and welcome anyone else's. Jay, I think you're next.
Yeah, actually, I agree with Ken that the lifting of the mask requirement is at least partially political. And I don't use the subway that much anymore since I retired, but I still wear a mask when I go on the subway. But my suggestion, Elizabeth, as the chair of the task force, is I think that we need to find out, since the law requires that our meetings be open to the public, I think it would be good to seek an objective opinion, and whatever the bias is, I think it should be a legal opinion as to what we can and can do, because we may meet, if we attempt to impose a mask requirement at our meetings and somebody or a group of people don't want to abide by it, and the city has lifted the restrictions, we don't want to be in a position where we're creating a possible conflict situation. So I think we should seek an opinion as to whether or not we can in fact require masking at our meetings, whether we can in fact limit the number of people that attend both our full board and committee meetings. I think there are fire department occupancy limitations on any public space. But my point is, I think it behooves us to know specifically what we can and can't do, so we know whether we can make the requirements voluntary or mandatory in advance, so that people know.
Well, I think at a minimum, we can recommend them. I've seen in a lot of restaurants and other places.
Yes, I know.
Lately, they've said like these are strongly recommended, and where the Upper West Side, I think people are responsible largely, and I think it's a question of like, do we enforce it? Do we turn somebody away if they're not going to wear a mask into
Well,
one of our into the
if you
board office?
don't, then you're kind of you're defeating the purpose, obviously. And if unfortunately, there are a lot of people, even on the west side of Manhattan, who have resisted vaccination, who have never been scrupulous about wearing masks and so forth. And I just think if we're going to come forward with recommendations, we should be on solid footing as to what we legally can and can't require of the public.
Elizabeth, I understood the borough president's office, he was asked this, and that we can legally have a mask mandate anyway.
It'll be, if that's true, Kate, Ken, that's fine.
I believe that
I
is the
hadn't heard
case.
that.
I believe that's the case. I do think that it, I think we want to be, the purpose of a community board is to open up our doors to everyone. We're obviously in a situation where we obviously want to protect health and safety, and we need to follow the guidance that our public health officials are telling us to do, more so in my view than the borough president. I think we need to follow what they're telling us and what they think is the safest thing for us to do to conduct meetings. I'll use the example of other public agencies that have held monthly meetings, and I know we're not talking about full board in this conversation necessarily, but monthly meetings like the MTA continue to hold their full board meetings, their public meetings, their community meetings. They do not require a mask mandate. The state has not required it, and they're doing it. And so, I would expect that if the law is not extended into November, it may be tough for us to, mandate it. I'm sure on a, meeting by meeting basis we could, but it is something that, I think has been, I don't want to say relaxed, but has been used for, and I don't know if any of you have gone to like LPC or to other, Ashley, if you've gone to like a district service cabinet, like what the rules are when you walk into a building down at one, down where the borough president's office is. But, I think we're going to have to follow those rules unless they change them. So that's sort of I saw Seema, and I know Polly, your hand's still up. So is that
Muted, Polly?
Yeah. Did you have a response? Because I know we're trying to, and yeah.
I also wanted to thank Ken for volunteering to buy the CO2.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
I'll
No, I
loan
think
you
the
mine.
CO2 meter is it's a good idea. I do know that Max has really been working on this, and I would encourage you guys, he, unfortunately can't be on tonight, but I would encourage you to contact him. He has like the specifics on the amount of money. He used some of, I think, the budget money that was left over to improve the ventilation. And, there may, I think this may be something that we could recommend that he do, if that gives more people on the board assurance that, the board office is safe. So Polly, did you have anything? And I know Seema, you had, I think your hand's still up.
No, I lowered my hand. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you. And your comments were really good. I mean, look, I think these are things we want to recommend to both the new chair and to Max. And I don't think there's a need tonight to do a resolution unless somebody strongly thinks we should. Any resolution we would do tonight would go on the November docket and would not get enacted until, after the November meetings. So happy to entertain it. I'm also happy to do another quick conversation if we think anything changes. So Seema, did you have any questions, or are you?
I just had a comment, which is that, our meetings are going to be hybrid insofar as the public will still be allowed to attend virtually, is my understanding. And so to the extent that we can't, accommodate people in person because of limitations, we can still encourage them. It's obviously limiting to who can join, but to the extent that they have a device and can join, at least there's a virtual option for them to do so.
Correct. And I think that's one of the silver linings of COVID has been, there's really been no silver lining of COVID, but has been that for those who do want to participate, and Zoom has been a blessing over the last 2.5 years, as we all know, that people who ordinarily, wouldn't be able to participate from the public. I think there's a difference between like the public who wants to just sort of come in for their agenda item, listen to it, and then zoom out. And then all of us who are required to be there for a full meeting. And I think that's where the real gray area is right now, about how we participate in person versus virtually. And, Jay, I completely agree with you. I think for all of us on Community Board 7, when we took the responsibility of joining the board, the understanding was that we would be joining, fully present in person for meetings, and that would be one full board meeting, and most likely for most people 2 committee meetings. And I don't think that's changed, but the issue now becomes with everything else changing in the environment we're working under, and with COVID and coming out of COVID and adapting to this new reality, it's really making a set of recommendations, which we did in July. And then also when it comes to committees, really focusing on, and I think the next step for this task force, before I leave it, is really looking at how we determine and work with the new board chair and anyone else for that matter, the borough president's office, on how we determine what counts as an absence, what doesn't, and what counts as sort of how you participate and whether your vote actually counts. My understanding is that starting in November, unless we hear otherwise, again, just to close out this conversation, if you want your vote to count, you show up in person. If you want, so that you count for the quorum and you're able to vote. And that's for both the full board and for committees. And Susan can weigh in if she wants to on anything related to the bylaws, on anything related to absences, but that is our understanding. And when it comes to people who they can show up for a meeting and still be counted as present for the meeting, but they won't be able to vote and count for a quorum.
They can vote, but they can't count towards a quorum.
Just to amplify a little bit what Seema asked about, that the only time the public can participate remotely by teleconferencing is if some member of the board is participating by teleconferencing. If everybody on the board shows up in person, then the member of the public has to be at that location to participate. If teleconferencing is used, then we're responsible for letting them know a location where they can participate by teleconferencing. So it's not automatic according to the statute.
Okay. I don't want to, I know, Susan, you've been like very quiet on this call, and I know you know all of the things that we voted on and approved related to the bylaws. Is there anything that we need to know about, or things that we're missing related? Because I think about it all the time, about even just when it came to the elections, of like how we vote and who we vote for and all those things. So is there anything that you want to advise us on?
No, the situation is so fluid. I don't think.
You're muted. Okay. So,
No, I wasn't talking. I was just shaking my head. No, I don't think there's any.
okay. If there's anything we need to, that you tagged in the okay. I really appreciate you joining tonight because I do think there is a little bit of overlap between what we're thinking about and what the bylaws have stated, and we want to make sure that we're in working together and not at cross purposes on those things. So if I could just
Elizabeth,
close out the meeting, I wanted just
Elizabeth?
to say that in terms of what I wrote. Oh, sure, Ken. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, at the risk of
Ken, did you
prolonging
have
the
a quick
meeting,
comment?
well, at the risk of prolonging the meeting a little longer, I'm sorry. It just seems to me that something like a mask mandate is maybe something that we can't, a can that we can't kick down the road. And that maybe we should decide either at this meeting or at a follow-up meeting sometime this month, because otherwise we're potentially looking at a month of meetings in November, full board and many committee meetings where it's all going to be decided on an ad hoc basis, and we don't know what's going to happen.
I'd be happy to propose, whether it's a resolution or just something we ask Beverly to advance, is whether it's recommending masks or requiring masks. I think just having sort of a recommendation for wearing masks in public, any of our public meetings, whether they're full board or committees, would be encouraged and recommended, is what I'm hearing.
Well,
if you're asking for
you're not hearing that from me.
You're hearing it as a requirement.
Yes, from a public health standpoint, absolutely.
And I'd also like to ask about checking vaccination cards, frankly.
My understanding is that we are not allowed to, this is potentially slightly outdated information. This is when there were mask mandates in the city, but when we had checked, this is in the spring, we were allowed to do a mask mandate then. We were not allowed to check for vax cards unless the facility that we were at, for instance, if we're at Fordham and they required vaccination proof, then we would be okay with requiring it in that case. I don't know if that will all change given the new context in which we're operating now, though.
Yeah, and again, I think we go to two scenarios here. There's our full board meetings, which I think are dependent, as Seema said, on the location where we're doing the meeting and what they require. And then there's what we want to ask of anyone for any meeting we do at the CB7 office. And my suggestion would be for tonight's meeting, we focus on the committee meetings and try to have a plan for if we want to propose a resolution, we have it focused on those committee meetings and anything that would take place in the board office where people would show up, because I don't think we're going to be able to control what happens at a full board meeting that's outside of the CB7 office. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Elizabeth, you should check with Kay and see if his church has any policy in place with regard to masks.
No, I'm sure they'll tell us, but I think it's beyond our control. The meeting, if there's
I think you should ask him, because if his facility requires it, then it's an easy step for us to just piggyback on whatever is required to begin
Got
with.
it.
So we may as well know.
But I guess for the purposes of tonight's meeting, do we want to put forward a resolution to go towards the November 1st full board meeting about requiring or mandating masks for committees?
Excuse me, Elizabeth, how many people are on this committee, this task force?
There are at least, I think, 12.
How many are here?
So we have a quorum.
I'm not
Ashley will know.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you can do a resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
it might be a buzzkill, but I don't think you have a quorum.
Yeah, we don't have a quorum.
I'm not on the committee
It's
either.
just the people on the
Seema's
screen.
the only one who's
The
not.
committee has always been very ad hoc, you guys. We've been doing it to try to just advance these ideas and move forward. And so I guess
I think we can do an informal recommendation to at least, I think the sentiment is at least for a recommendation that attendees, I know, Ken, Yeah, I know you're shaking your head. I know you, but if we can't do a resolution because we don't have a quorum, I think we can convey a sense of this meeting that at least the recommendation to wear masks is agreed upon.
Well, I
Yes.
would like the sense of this meeting. I think the sense of this meeting may be that we want a mask mandate.
Well, I'm not
You
convinced.
may not
I'm not,
agree
I'm
with
not
that,
sure
but,
we're there. I'm not sure we're there on that, but I
well,
think
maybe we should have a straw poll.
a straw poll right now.
Yeah.
Look, guys, I'm doing my best to try to run this meeting and not keep us. I know it's been a long week for a lot of people and they've been observing holidays and everything else. So I believe strongly, based on the consensus that we have from this team tonight of people who decided to join, that we want to make sure that people's health and safety is protected in the board office when we do our committee meetings. And the strong consensus seems to be that we would strongly encourage people, if not enforce, but certainly to encourage wearing a mask. If we do not have a quorum, we can't vote on a resolution. So we cannot put this in place tonight. If we want to have another conversation, if we can rally a few more people from the task force who want to join, who feel strongly about this and want to join either way and want to do a meeting before the end of the month, we meet once a month. The board has a very stacked schedule over the next 2 weeks, which is why I was pushing so hard to make sure that we did this meeting this week, both to update you all on what's going to happen on November 1st and also to think through how we're going to handle committee meetings. So I'll leave that there. I would prefer not to do another meeting, and I do think
Elizabeth,
yes.
why can't we simply just get a sense of the meeting? Who's in favor of the masks? 1, 2, 3.
But we're all in favor of the mask. The question is, do we want to require them for people? And it's not just for us who are on this call, it's for the people in the public. And there are people in the public, Madge, quite frankly, who are members of the public and they care about our neighborhood in the same way we do. And they don't feel like wearing a mask is as big of an issue. So we need to take that into consideration as well.
Do we know legally if we can have a mask?
We don't, and I think we can't. I think the answer is no, we cannot do it.
Yeah, so why don't we just convey to Bev and the executive committee that the sense of the task force is to have a recommendation that people wear masks. We can't be faulted for a recommendation or a preference. And that way we don't get into a question of legal requirements. So
I think that is fine. And I also think that the new chair and the board office and the borough president's office, for those people and those people in the public who I think there are, as Stima said, there are virtual options available for the public to join our meetings if they're uncomfortable joining in person, wearing a mask. We will encourage people to wear a mask. People who don't want to wear a mask, for the occasional person who doesn't on the Upper West Side, in the board office, we hope that will not lead to, based on science and data, anything that would be discouraging for our board members or for the public to participate. Does anyone have any strong objections to sort of making a very, very strong recommendation that we encourage people to wear a mask?
I would just say that some people won't participate because there are people in the room not wearing masks and they don't feel safe.
That's their choice.
So no, well, it's the choice. It's the choice to not wear a mask, and it's the choice to not be in the room if people are not wearing masks.
Right.
I mean, it's
well, I guess
both people have equal value.
Everyone has equal value. This is the whole reason why we have the task force. But the point is that because we have a virtual option now, there is an opportunity for people to weigh in and voice their opinions if they're uncomfortable joining in person. The only people who are really, who I don't want to say I'm concerned about, but the people who are really the people who 100% need to be in person are the quorum of a given committee. So it's really all of you on this call making sure that if you show up, that, if any one of you, and I don't know how many of our 50 members are uncomfortable wearing a mask inside the board office, but I would think it would be very few. And maybe it's not, and we're not going to require them if somebody really doesn't want to wear a mask, but those really are the only people. Anyone else, if they feel uncomfortable wearing a mask, they or not, they can participate virtually.
Well, they may be able to participate. It's not automatic.
No, I'm talking about the public, Jay.
I'm talking about the public. The statute only permits public participation remotely if some member or members of the board are participating remotely. If the meeting is all in person,
Yeah, I think that's really, look, I've been chairing this committee for almost a year now, and I think at some point people have to stop looking at the fine print and basing things on what people want to do. And if people want to participate virtually, we're allowing, I think the borough president and the boards are allowing that option for anyone who's not a voting board member. If you're a voting board member, at some point, every one of us on this call who is a voting board member is likely going to have to show up at the board office for a meeting. And it's going to be up to you if you want to wear a mask or not until we hear otherwise. We are going to strongly encourage, and I think most people will either wear a mask or they will be showing up in a way that makes sure that they are socially distant and that they are using their best judgment on things. And that, I think, is the way that I believe that the task force has operated over the last, few months. Is just it's a judgment question. The public situation is really different. It is somewhat different from what we're discussing tonight, although we do feel that the public, has the option of showing up, strongly encouraging them to wear a mask, but we, also allow them if they don't want to and they don't want to show up, or they're upset about not being able to show up and feel uncomfortable in a situation that might be crowded, they can join virtually and participate in the same way.
Unlike you, Elizabeth, I don't ignore the so-called fine print. The statute is the statute. And it's not, the public does not have an absolute right to participate remotely. And we could go on and on forever, but that's the law. And I don't ignore it. And I don't consider it fine print. If they don't want to wear a mask and they feel uncomfortable and they don't want to go to a meeting with a lot of people where several people aren't wearing masks, then they have an option to stay home. That's life.
Okay, no, your point is.
Excuse me, well put, Jay. I take some issue with the notion of the fine print, but unfortunately, I'm going to log off. Thanks so much for hosting this tonight. I got to go. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Susan.
Bye.
Can we come
So
to
look,
a decision?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to close out the meeting. I want to thank everyone for joining. I just want to make sure that the recommendations, or at least the things we're going to present to the district manager and to the board, the new board chair, are one that we strongly recommend masks for the public and board members, and we're looking to seek an opinion as soon as possible. Second is we would like to limit the number of people in the audience, and obviously require, or at least recommend, that they wear masks when we are in this is all in the board office, and recommend a CO2 meter that the board invests some funds in to purchase to help with ventilation, and provide an update on exactly what the ventilation currently is. Those are the three things.
How does a CO2 meter can relate to the threat of the transmission of a virus?
Well,
Measure.
it tells you how much tells you how many people are in the room,
Well,
and how much how how much air exchange there is in the room. Like if you have really good air filters, then even if you have a lot of people in the room, you're not going to get a high CO2 because there's a lot of air turnover. So it basically tells you, is there a lot of stagnant air there with people breathing and the CO2 just sort of hanging in the air, just like a virus would?
So
Or,
it's measuring circulation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I
think we can definitely agree on that piece. And again, we agreed this meeting would only be an hour, well, 45 minutes, and we've gone over. But look, there are no easy answers to any of these things. I guess the final question for those who are on the call, I know we don't have a quorum, but I think we wait, make these recommendations. We work together as a team with the new chair, try to figure out what's going to happen as we head into November, but that we present a set of plans. And unless somebody wants to do a resolution, which we can't do tonight because we don't have a quorum, we could meet in another week and propose a resolution so it could be on the November agenda. Do people have thoughts on whether we should do that or whether we should?
Truthfully, I don't think it's necessary. I mean,
okay.
I think
this meeting's being recorded, and I know that the chair is going to look at it, and we will be able to take that input back. So appreciate everyone for staying late tonight and for all of your insights. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Elizabeth.
Have a great night.
Good night.